of hearings for our 10-year plan. And our first speaker today is Claire Carey. Claire, welcome.
Thank you.
I thought it was going to blow up. Welcome, and the next 5 minutes are yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today to my submission on the 10-year plan. I'll be concise in my remarks because my written submission states its concerns comprehensively. But it does need to be considered thoroughly because the implications are not only long-term but immediate. In fact, they've attained urgency over the past 10 months when the combination of king tides and severe storms have twice coincided to temporarily close access between Port Chalmers and Aramoana by making Aramoana Road impassable and highly dangerous. I have recently placed the matter before the West Harbour Community Board, and I acknowledge some remedial work is in progress, but I'm not persuaded that the board fully appreciates the gravity of the problem, which is worsening, although one of its members, Jan Tucker, significantly has raised the matter personally with the council. Having lived at Tanari for more than 40 years, I cannot emphasise too strongly the extent to which homes are at jeopardy and that the current remedial work on Aramoana Road and the adjoining seawall is inadequate to cope with any repetition of the two recent events. In essence, sections of the roadway need to be elevated and the rock seawall needs to be heightened. Anything less will not do. I recognise this will be costly, but Aramoana Road is the only available access to a significant conservation and recreational area, as well as a small but vibrant community. Moreover, the expenditure involved will be far less than that proposed for road improvements on the peninsula. I also believe Port Otago should accept some responsibility, particularly for the seawall, and would encourage the DCC to make overtures to the Otago Regional Council so that the port company establishes a mitigation fund to provide for remedial work resulting from port activities. Collaboration in this way would not only expedite such work on both sides of the harbour, in fact, but would mean a more equitable sharing of costs. I would urge the Council to give this issue not only serious consideration, but priority in its implementation. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. You happy to take questions?
Yeah.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I don't know if you've read the Otago Regional Council their plan, but they've got a suggestion for a harbour community group. But are you going to them, supporting that sort of group, but also asking them to fund this sort of thing as well?
Well, I'm expecting the elected people in the city to be going out to bat on these issues too. I mean, I'm happy to, but I'm coming to here to get the support, because you are the people that got elected to look after the interests of the citizens. I'm one individual.
I appreciate that, and so I'm just wondering whether you're also doing that. We're considering our submission tomorrow at council.
Good.
But I was just wondering whether you'd be also submitting to them, because it certainly adds voices.
Well, yes, it would. Well, I hope to then. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms Carey, are you aware, as I understand it, there's a meeting for people in that area that the West Harbour Community Board are leading, and our transportation operations people will be involved in? I think it's in July at some time. I don't have the details, but are you aware of that? Mm-hmm. You are?
Yes, but it hasn't had a set date or anything. And it was when I went along to the West Harbour Community Board in February. The sea had been round my house twice in 6 months. So anything that was a long way in the future, to me, was quite a long way away.
Thank you for presenting, and I would encourage you to present to the ORC as well on this issue. But I was just wondering, in your opinion, whether in fact this problem had gotten worse over the years, or from your observation?
Definitely.
It has. Mm.
Yes, well, the roading manager pointed out at the community board meeting how, like, the sea, they did a beautiful job on the seawalls, but that was a long time ago and it hasn't been maintained. And what's been happening in lots of places is that the sea has been coming through the seawall rocks, the cracks, and eating away at the road, so that it eventuated on February the 1st with half of Hamilton Bay no road at all. And I can tell you about my neighbour who drove down that road at full tide and really thought she was that was it, because she couldn't see the road, you couldn't see the hole. Where she had been describing to me was that particular place. It's highly dangerous.
Thank you. Just wondering also, with the extra ships coming down the harbour, would that have the cruise ships coming into the environment, you know, the wash and things like that, on if there was a higher tide, etc., would that have helped things or not helped things?
Would help the erosion. The cruise ships aren't entirely the worst problem, because some of the wake from the cruise ships is quite impressively small, but a lot of the other ships, they have a far bigger wake, and I don't necessarily observe all those things, but lately I have started observing wakes a lot more, and it really eats in. Really eats in. Mm. And also the dredging in the harbour, build-up of sand, like the little beach at Chinaru. It's a lovely little beach now, but the sand has got higher and higher, and it's making the problem worse rather than better.
No further questions? Thank you very much
Good.
for your submission.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Ms Walters. Welcome.
Thank you. And I've got, sorry, I've got copies there.
Far away.
Thank you. My talk is about semi-rural halfway bush and Fraser Gully. It is important that Dunedin looks after the assets it already has, such as semi-rural halfway bush. This area provides recreation, employment and business opportunities which should be nurtured so that it can continue to benefit the people of Dunedin and its economy. Semi-rural halfway bush is only 10 minutes away from the city. It is separated from suburban halfway bush by a gully, so it gives a natural transition area between city and rural. As soon as you leave the suburban area and cross the gully, it feels different, a country feel. What makes semi-rural halfway bush unique? It is close to town, yet rural in appearance and character, with grazing animals and paddocks. The area is made up of mostly 2 hectare or more lots of land. Stone walls, which are built from the special local stones that show a history of stone wall building from the 1850s. People come to photograph the stone walls as well as use them as backgrounds for weddings and other special occasions. A place that recreational walkers, runners and cyclists enjoy visiting and training in. The Dunedin Branch Pony Club, which has a top-rate cross-country course, which they are planning to upgrade. Tourism in the form of farm stays, cruise boat visits, farm tours, as it is in a rural setting with rural views. This also gives an outlet for local produce to be sold. Ashburn Clinic, a private psychiatric hospital. Why the concern? Currently, the area is under threat to change from semi-rural to residential. If this is allowed to happen, then this is the end of semi-rural halfway bush. As once a precedent is made, the area would become suburbia. The effects this would have. The pony club would no longer be able to function as there would be a shortage of grazing land, and pony clubs do not usually reside in the middle of a residential suburb. Workers in both the agricultural, animal and tourism areas would lose work. These workers include tour operators, hay contractors, fencers, cleaners, etc. Tourism businesses such as farm stays, farm tours and companies that manufacture local produce will no longer have an outlet to sell their goods and services. Historical stone walls will be destroyed. It has been sad to watch stone walls being damaged in the current Dalziel Road subdivision in order to put in driveways. It will no longer be a place for recreational users such as walkers, runners, cyclists to visit. It would have a major impact on the local people who enjoy living in or near the area. As well as the semi-rural area being destroyed, it would cause major water runoff, flooding. When it rains in semi-rural halfway bush, the water is soaked up by the paddocks. However, for every new house in the area, there is less surface area for the water to be soaked up. This extra water needs to go somewhere, so it goes into the Fraser Gully. Unfortunately, Fraser Gully is unable to sustain this water volume, so as well as washing out tracks, the increased water volume continues on its journey to the sea via Crikra Valley, leading to the potential of flooding. I have personally noticed that when houses were built in the semi-rural Dalziel Road area, that the main Fraser Gully track started to get washed out. Conclusion. I have shown that semi-rural halfway bush is a beneficial asset to Dunedin by way of recreational benefits and tourism. This area needs to remain intact so that it can continue to benefit Dunedin for future generations to come.
Thank you. Questions, councillors? Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wondered, did you make a submission to the 2GP?
Yes, we did.
Okay, thank you.
But I know that the 2GP is about zoning, but this is about looking after a part of the bigger picture part of semi-rural halfway bush, which includes working and tourism.
Yeah. No further questions?
Oh, can I just ask when the main Fraser Gully track is going to be reopened?
Look, I can't give you that answer now because I don't know it, but we're happy to provide you with that if Chief Executive will make some inquiries and we'll get back to you with that information.
That'd be wonderful. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Ms Rusk. Oh, there.
My talk's pretty similar, so... Unfortunately, my printer died just as I was about to print this off, so I have got a PDF if anyone needs a copy, but I can't give you any hard copy right now. How do I hit play? I'm sorry, I'm a Mac user. Can someone... Do I just hit... I just need to hit play.
Sorry?
I just need to hit play.
It should go to slideshow somewhere up.
New slide, no.
No. Oh, no.
Oh, that's all right.
Here, Conrad. If you click there. Next one, next one, next one.
Doesn't matter.
Next one.
No, there it is there. That's it there, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's just...
That one there.
Yeah, that one.
It's not making use of it.
Sorry about that. Look, I'm actually presenting on behalf of the Halfway Bush Keep Halfway Bush Semi-Rural Incorporated, and I'm the chairwoman of that group. And I guess our submission is about the potential rezoning of the land in the area and how that will impact, as Alice has already alluded to, on other potential businesses, tourism and recreational use. So we were incorporated in May 2016. We have about 33 members in our group, and the goal of our society is to protect the semi-rural aspects of Halfway Bush so that the current recreational users, lifestyle block owners and visitors to our city centre can enjoy the uniqueness of this area. I've used a PowerPoint presentation just because I can present some photos which probably give a better visual of the area that we're talking about. The valuable features that we consider as a group that are important date back to the 1860s. We've got the stone walls and a historic bluestone barn that is in the area. It's also situated in a high landscape value area. There are a lot of recreational users and there is increased tourism in the area, both with private farm tours and local tour groups that bring passengers from the cruise ships up our way. The first of these historical features are the stone walls. They were used as part of a route where the gold miners walked through to the goldfields in the 1861 sort of era. These stone walls that go up through the Pinot Block were actually knocked down when the subdivision went in there back in 2000, but there are some cairns in place which outline the area, so I'll just go through what they mark. So the first of the cairns that they state they mark the line of the stone wall which lay beside the old West Taieri Road, a route used by miners walking to the Otago goldfields from 1861. John and Elizabeth Kedsley began dairy farming in the area in the early 1860s and set up the Settlers Arms Hotel, which is located near what is now Dalziel Road. The Kedsleys farmed 150 acres of this land until they sold it to the Pinot family in 1947. It is likely the older part of the stone cow byre that dates from the early 1860s. This is the old stone barn. The historic part is the smaller bit on the right-hand side that you see. They believe that the second part of the barn was probably built in the mid-1860s. It was originally restored by Dave Bell, who bought the property when it went up for sale by the council in 2000, and he's restored it back using the same trusses and doors and windows that were originally featured in the building when it was built. Currently it's used as an alpaca shop, including holding farm implements. It's also a tourist destination for cruise ship guests who come through for their lunch there, and they get to meet the alpacas on the property, and it also hosts private farm tours. Just below the stone barn is also the site of the early Settlers Arms Hotel, where we've got the remains of the foundations. There are also 150-year-old apple trees and macrocarpa trees on the property. These are just some of the pictures we've got a wedding that happened. People like to take pictures. I've had car enthusiasts come up and park their car behind the stone barn. The bottom picture is part of the Book a Tour cruise ship company that bring their guests up. And the inside of where the shop is up on that top right-hand corner. It's also a high recreational use area, so you'll frequently in that area see horse riding, walking, running, mountain biking and cycling up 3 Mile Hill. And going through the strategic plan of the Dunedin City Council, I note that it has an obligation to promote an active city with limited land available, so close to the city centre for recreational purposes. The loss of this land will be significant to many users of the Dunedin community. And of particular concern is that the Pony Club is up for rezoning, and also a large area on Dalziel Road, which would make it large lot residential and dramatically change what people can do in the area as well as the landscape value. This is a view taken from up on the Pineapple Track, not too far up. And as you can see, the bulk of houses that you see there are Brockville, and then the native gully, where Fraser Gully is, that Alice alluded to in her talk. The area that could significantly change is just to the west of those houses on Brockville. And you can see that it would have a dramatic impact on the views that are seen as you walk up here. I know this is a high landscape area, it's in the Flagstaff Mount Cargill Landscape Conservation Area, and it is highly visible from the Pineapple Track in many areas as you walk up there. So in summary, our group believe that maintaining this land as it currently exists would ensure that the features are preserved for future generations to enjoy. These include the historical features, the high landscape area, the recreational area and tourism that comes along with the beautiful assets we have up there. Thank you.
Thank you. You're happy to take questions? Yeah. Sure. Questions, councillors? Councillor Elder.
I like that area too. I go up Flagstaff and I love that Fraser's Gully walk, which I stick up for all the time. And indeed it isn't open yet. But one of the things I was going to ask is, if some of those character features were put into a plan, like stone walls, that character has to be built into developments or plantings that would be sympathetic, or say the road going through Dalziel Road had a cycleway and a horse area, same as going up through to 3 Mile Hill. Could some of that, I'm just asking the question, so that the character of the landscape is planned in any development, is put into any development, let's say, would that somehow help? I don't know. I'm just asking the question because I know the area well and I like the area, but as you can understand, there's also conflict. We haven't got enough houses in Dunedin, and we are growing. So, could there be things put into a plan that could ameliorate some of that? I know. You wouldn't want that.
Look, I am a landowner and it is my property that has that stone barn. I'm also directly across the road from where the subdivision would go ahead. So my experience with Dalziel Road is it's not wide enough to expand to anything.
So you'd like the road widened?
I don't know if you can, but to me there's no... I'm not an earthwork person, but yeah, I'm not sure how you would expand that. And the other threat is that, our animals graze the border of that. So, if we've increased residential living, we increase dog roaming and everything else. So, that might just have a progressive impact on whether it's even feasible to have a lifestyle block across the road from that. And that's probably a concern. I know that the visitors that we get up there, they're absolutely blown away when they see all that sort of semi-rural aspect, and it is a real selling point for Dunedin in general. But yeah, I think it would be a shame. I think it would be a shame if the Pony Club moved on. Again, there are a lot of people that actually make money off their lifestyle block to graze people's horses there as well. So it will have an impact on a lot of lifestyle block owners, and I can only see it being pushed further and further back up towards the top of Halfway Bush Road.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for your presentation, and yeah, I can understand where you're coming from anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a very quick question. Did you make a submission to the 2GP?
Yes, we have.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Now, Queenie Scott. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Now, I understand you're standing in for Philip.
Yes. You can call me Philip. Thank you. Such is the nature of community groups.
Now, you'll need to just press that button and make sure the red light
Is on.
that one.
Okay,
That's it.
yes,
Yep.
thank you. Thank you very much for allowing us to come and speak today. I'm Maureen Howard and this is Queenie Scott, and we're speaking on behalf of Transition Valley 473, which is based in the North East Valley area. I'll begin now. So, in general, we are very, very pleased with how the Council has been taking a proactive stance on climate change and investigating it. So we are very grateful, and for the lobbying work that you do to central government. We are a little bit surprised to see that the debt seems to be going up for this next term, or that is being proposed. And considering that, you know, all the work that needs to be done and unexpected costs into the future of mitigating and adapting to climate change. We in particular, you know, in concerns with South Dunedin, we think that's a very important issue. There are other areas, but of course this is an area that holds a larger number of people. We would like to see different options put on the table with regards to, you know, the future of that area, that could include even beautifying it and making it into a wetland, but obviously involving people in the community. I think that's we think that's a really important part of doing that. But looking at different options and perhaps looking at it in a as positive way as it could possibly be. We are very pleased about the support that we've been getting for our fruit and nuts project and for the community gardens that are around the city. I think there's over 20 different things now in terms of orchards and community gardens. Wouldn't it be a great idea to have this on a map on the Dunedin City site so that we can show everybody and they can go and visit? And because we would love to be able to know where they are. It's a bit of a mission to try and find them. And another thing we would ask for is, please, could we have a reduction in the rental of the land, you know, if it's on Dunedin City Council land for the community gardens, because for many groups it is actually quite a lot, and we hope that you could do that.
Speaking. Okay, I'm going to pick up on the transport at this point. The changes that have been happening in terms of bringing together the routes and so on for us, we know that it sits with regional council. One of the strongest things we hear from our people that we're working with is they would really love to see it come through into council and get connected with the roading and other social stuff that's going on. We have people who are cyclists, we have people who are pedestrians in the valley. That's quite a strong part, being the type of valley it is, and quite a lot of conversation goes on asking about looking at the possibility for traffic calming for slower rates within the gardens. Another area that gets a lot of pedestrian use is up around Baldwin Street, and that area we think that could potentially be a precinct that allows for more social type things, and really would support that anywhere.
Onto the bridge, heading over to the harbour. Now, we did have some mixed feelings within our group on that issue. I'm sure that you've probably had that in here. But most people were concerned about the cost and feeling that perhaps, is it really necessary in the way that it's being described? Because there's one issue, which is one fact that Dunedin is not as big a city as Wellington. Okay, so it has worked, you know, developing the harbour precinct has worked really well there, but Dunedin is not as big, and do we run the risk of diluting the energy and the buzz that we already have in the Octagon? You know, so we're not as big, you know, it's always much more exciting to be crammed into a smaller space, and so I'm a little bit concerned about the dilution effect. We're also concerned about the cost of the bridge, and are there other ways of doing it in a more, much more cost-effective way that supports pedestrians and cyclists? Did you want to talk
To the bridge?
Yeah, just that.
Oh, just that some of us do probably would support that's looking at some way of coming. Yeah, the alternate view of having a connection that comes through the Chinese Gardens railway area to try and link it. So there are both ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, waste reduction, reuse, recycle. So someone noted that when without the transfer station or other ways of accessibility for people, we're quite a long way from there. A lot of people don't have transport, and like all those issues, as we're dealing with reducing fossil fuels type transport, it's about accessibility. So we'd welcome any way that can keep accessibility to that waste stuff within the city. They're part of the group have it all, tried to have it collecting green waste within the valley. It's well support. It was good, but we think that should be a council role to pick up on that, and so we'd really welcome that change over to look at bringing in waste and using it. Sewage, really glad that the stormwater sewage stuff's happening. Look forward to hearing what happens with the stormwater sewage. I guess that's under the second generation plan, that dialogue can be kept open for. So, for example, in the work we do in line with the project with Creek Fest, again, thank you very much for the funding of community, things like that. It highlighting all the time, how do we have that dialogue with council about what's happening for the creek rather than lots of separate little entities, and be part of that.
Okay, so we do have lots of points, but we'll leave it at that for today. Thank you.
You do, and they're very clearly laid out in your submission, so thank you.
Thank you.
It's very easy to follow the submission. Councillor Benson,
thank you. I'd echo that. It's a really comprehensive response to what we're up to, or what we might be up to. A couple of things. How big is your group?
That's a good question. We have a lot of people on the mailing list, you know, so...
How many people have you got on your mailing list?
I don't know. I don't have that information.
About 130, isn't it? But because it crosses over with the project mailing list, so our stuff goes out, when we have our evening get-togethers, which are open to the whole community, the room will be full at the community rooms. That can be 40, 50 people come together. Picture passion.
In respect of your repeated requests for lower traffic speeds, both through calming or changing zones, I'd certainly welcome that, and I hope you apply through various council processes to do that, because you can now.
Oh, right. Who do we? Oh, right. Okay.
Just write to Councillor Wilson, and she will facilitate it.
Okay. Excellent.
Thanks, Kate. I'll get one for that. But more importantly, I'm interested in this comment you make about people smashing stuff at the stadium. Is that anecdotal or is it real? Smashing screens?
Yes. I have it on good authority that it is real. Mm-hmm.
Can you let us know in confidence where you got that from so we can follow it up, please?
You
don't have to do it publicly.
Yeah, no, I won't do it publicly. Yeah.
But
I'll talk to the person. Is it okay if I talk to the person and come back to you? At the time, the person was very excited to share the information, but then when I told them that it happened, they became a bit anxious.
That's the problem with this sort of anecdotal stuff. I'd like to know whether it's true or not. So I'll leave that with you.
Well, I think if you ask, then you'll find out the truth, you know.
Well, we will certainly do that, but if you've got information, what I'm saying is if you've got information from someone who believes that to be true, that can be dealt with in confidence, but I'd certainly like to know.
Okay.
Well, can I suggest that if you wish to have it kept in confidence, you bring it to the CEO, and she will decide if Councillor Benson Pope needs to know.
Okay, yes, okay, yeah. Okay.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks very much for your submission. I'm just asking you a question sort of to raise it up, and that is the DCC taking over the buses has come up. It comes up a lot. It comes up year after year. Would you want us then to lobby central government to change the Act which actually prohibits us from taking over the buses? Because in fact the issue is actually a central government issue.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want a clarification on that, because I think it's time for us to potentially think about where our strategies are going.
Yeah, we've sat in on quite a few of the regional council consultations as well, and it comes through that the people who are working with the local communities probably have a better clue or chance of hearing what the local communities have to say.
So there are statutory blocks right now which prohibit us, so we have to overcome them if we were to do that path. So
Good.
you want us to go down that path?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And thank you. I just wanted to pick up on your point around the mapping of fruit and nut trees. Do you have an idea of what that would look like in any physical sense? I'm not sure if you're familiar with Nelson's open orchards.
Oh, I am actually. I've seen
right.
it, and it's a route that people can. They've got several little routes that you can follow. I guess I was more thinking that it would be great to have it on a map online, so that people can you can zoom in on, and then you can click on and you can find the site.
I might just add that there's this actually there is one, in the sense that what I'd like to encourage is developing that so that it is tying in with local education and how to really involve the community, so that they're not just there as seen as.
Yeah, but it's not on the DCC site.
Oh, okay, but there is a site,
Right.
Southern Health, you've got.
It's not up to date. Yeah. Okay.
But but tying that into the education side of DCC, the Enviro schools, and the way it links in with the sort of thing we've got in the Valley, the project, which is able to connect those hubs, and again back to that, how can council best keep on feeding into the sustainability education and those community projects.
You'd be pleased to know there is a Google Maps layer for open orchards in Nelson. I was just trying to ask.
I don't know if there is, because
Well,
what
I
I
just
had
found it,
seen was I had got several little maps
Right.
from there, and you could follow them. It was a really great idea. It was more like, but as a sort of an activity that you could go and follow and look at all the different things. But whereas I was thinking of something where, people could say, yep, these are all of the. Gardens, and then zoom in and see who's created them, and perhaps things about them, how they're run. Like, this kind of information would be really great, and further information about how to actually. So I'm talking about, because I'm coming to speak tomorrow as well about this. So. Yeah, I don't.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your submission. Maureen, I just wanted to pick up on the sustainability education, and given the huge success of the courses that you ran in local communities, I wondered if that was the kind of model you had in mind around waste reduction. Is that reaching out to people at a local level a really effective way of doing it? It's my impression that it is, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Because I did do it for a long time, so obviously I thought it was very worthwhile. But I think, it's good at coming at it from different angles, Yeah, not everybody will choose to do a course, but they do talk to their families, they talk to their neighbours. So I think it's great to have stalls, like they do it at the university, and the orientation day, and giving people lots of information. So I think more than one avenue needs to be.
So different approaches. We
Certainly
still talk about your courses, by the way.
Do you?
Certainly the council fundings and the means that have helped us support the community events in the Valley, which, as I say, link in with the project, link in with other groups, the ability to hire the community rooms at very low cost. There's anything that supports local hubs, more of them, like the project, that allows us to bring people into the sort of workshops we've had, be it cosy homes or be it just what is going on in your local communities. That really helps, really helps.
No more questions? Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
very
Have a
clear
good day.
submission. Appreciate it. Would appear there are no more submitters at the moment. One is due right now. So we'll just tie-ho until Generation Zero. Well, were there... Well, were there any submitters available, I would have them up there, but there's none.
Is this because they didn't get the written submission? Oh, I don't know. I just assumed it was going to be DOS.
What he reckons. So, Ms. Beavis, well, you're very welcome to come up now. I know you're slightly early, but the submitters who were to submit at this time are not here. So, and you're representing Wells South.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, again, welcome, and the next 5 minutes is yours. So.
Lovely. Do I have to press this button, or is it all on? Fabulous. Okay, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, ko Tararo te maunga, ko Ohau te awa, ko Tainui te waka, ko Ngāti Raukawa te iwi, ko Well South tōku mahi, ko Brittany tōku ingoa. So, kia ora everyone. Sorry, I just walked up those stairs, it kills me. My name's Brittany and I'm a health promotion specialist at Well South. So thank you very much for allowing me to come and speak to our submission on the 10-year plan. So Well South is a charitable trust funded by Southern DHB to provide primary health care to the enrolled population of Otago and Southland. And so as part of this, the health promotion team advocates for healthy environments for our communities to promote social, cultural and physical wellbeing. So firstly, I would like to thank the Council for considering us as a key stakeholder when promoting the 10-year plan, and to build on this, we'd like to be a part and be included in the planning process. So the 10-year plan consultation document appears to have a focus on tourism and economy building. Well South supports the Council's emphasis on making Dunedin one of the world's great small cities and wanting to create revenue for Dunedin. However, research shows that valuing and enabling community wellbeing is a primary contributor to the attractiveness of a destination. So it's also well known that healthier people are more productive, which is why the Council needs to take steps to ensure our whānau experiences optimal hauora, and explicitly acknowledging health and wellbeing and the visions and goals of that are proposed for Dunedin, and providing a clear statement of intent to the community that their council is committed to and values the importance of nourishing our tangata at all levels, at all times. Healthy, productive communities need healthy, productive people. So one way in which the council can ensure the health and wellbeing of Dunedin and Mosgiel is by ensuring active transport is easily accessible by all people. This will also help the council to meet the strategic direction of healthy and safe people, as outlined in Dunedin's social wellbeing strategy. Active transport is predominantly walking and cycling, and there are many positive health outcomes that are associated with active transport, including a decreased risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and even cancer, whilst improving one's mental health. Active transport boosts the economy as it attracts visitors to the area. Thus, I congratulate the Council for the resounding success of the trial pedestrianisation of the Lower Octagon during the Easter period. So how do you make active transport more accessible, you may ask? Consulting with those who use active transport infrastructure is number one, as well as community groups such as Disability Support, Victor and Pan Otago, who can provide expert advice. The second way is by ensuring walking infrastructure meets the needs of the community. For example, making sure footpaths are wide enough with minimal camber so that the whānau with strollers, the elderly and our disabled community are able to use these with ease. So the Council has already done a great job at reintroducing the barn dance intersections, which makes walking safer by putting emphasis on the pedestrian. So this takes me back to my prior point. The Easter period trial was such a success that we would like to see the Lower Octagon pedestrianised permanently. This shouldn't come at a cost to the surrounding businesses, as there is substantial evidence that increased foot traffic can increase trading. We would also like to praise the Council for adopting the Dunedin Good Food Charter. This is one step in meeting the food resilience goal outlined in the DCC Energy Plan. However, there is more that the Council can do to support the Charter. These include planting of fruit and nut trees, making all family-orientated events sugar, sweet and beverage free, or water-only events, and ensuring access to well-maintained drinking fountains in all DCC parks and reserves and throughout the central city. And Well South is prepared and happy to support the Council in this. The final area we would like the Council to consider is to further build on their smoke-free efforts in order to meet New Zealand's Smoke-Free Aotearoa 2025 goal. It would be great to see the Council follow the recent positive efforts of the Invercargill City Council by making both Dunedin and Mosgill's central business districts smoke-free and vape-free. We are doing well at working towards the goal, however we only have 7 years left, and there's still a long way to go. Therefore, all organisations need to step up and work together on this. Wales South is happy to support the Council to make Dunedin smoke and vape free, as well as with the procurement of smoke-free signage. So, to recap, Wales South urges the Council to consider us when planning for the future of Dunedin, and that the health and wellbeing of our people is explicitly addressed in all future plans. The health and wellbeing of the Dunedin community can be nourished by better pedestrian infrastructure, greater support given to the Good Food Dunedin Charter, and making Dunedin and Mosgiel smoke and vape free. Thank you.
Thank you. You happy to take questions?
Yep.
Sure. Questions, councillors? Councillor Benson-Pope.
Just in respect to the specifics of your request about smoke vape free areas, you're saying the whole of the central business district and the Mosgiel shopping district?
Yes.
South Dunedin?
Yes. I see Dunedin as a whole, but I also like to outline Mosgiel because we sometimes forget about them.
I'm not trying to lead you, I'm just trying to get the magnitude of what's being suggested. So would that include other small shopping areas like the Gardens or Highgate?
Eventually, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's best to start in the big and spread out.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Elder.
Being of Scottish heritage, I heard you say two things which I thought excited me, and that was you mentioned about the drinking fountains and Southern District Health Board being able to support with this. In what way?
So both Southern District Health Board and Well South are part of the Good Food Dunedin network, and as part of this, we are looking at getting more water fountains. So we're happy to help with the procurement of signage, work with the network on designs, and at the moment we've got a map which shows all of our water fountains, which aren't a lot, and some of them look like bird baths. So we're happy to help with the design and
and mapping and things like that.
And mapping and and signage.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, because those plastic.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Brittany, for a really expansive submission. I just wanted to clarify something. We had another submitter who talked about, it was about mobility and accessibility, and talked about if it's family friendly, then it actually helps everyone. If it's okay for the older folk, it actually works for everyone. When I look at your recommendation around smoke-free and breastfeeding friendly, which you've come and talked to us about before, if we put that overarching family friendly on it in relation to drinking fountains, would that help? I mean,
yes.
Those are all elements of that concept?
Yes. Yeah, it's essentially just making it community friendly.
Community friendly, yeah.
And I have found, in just recent experience, that mothers and whānau with strollers and pushchairs face the same difficulties as those in wheelchairs because of the camber and the width of footpaths as well. So yes, if you make it good for your family friendly, it will embrace the whole community.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Worship. Just picking up on that intersection between the smoke-free policy and family friendliness, and not being intentionally provocative, but there are times where there are large groups of people in the Octagon that you wouldn't anticipate to see small children in pushchairs late into the evening or early into the morning. So would you entertain that as an option for consideration, as something that dealt with the daylight hours as separate from the late night economy, as they call it?
If I'm answering your question correctly, I don't think there's any difference in when we should have a smoke-free or a family-free city. I think it should be at all times. I don't think we need to have separate times. And I mean, we're working towards the Smoke-Free Aotearoa 2025 goal anyway, so we should make the whole CBD smoke-free, irrespective of timing. If that sort of answers your question, maybe I've got it wrong.
Thank you.
Okay.
No further questions? Thank you very much for your submission. Mr. Willis. Now, can you just clarify for us, Mr. Willis, for whom you're speaking? Because I think the submission loaded here is the same one that you gave some time ago. So
this is I'm speaking on behalf of the Blueskin Resilient Communities Trust, and but I'm speaking not in relation to place-based groups, which was the discussion partway through the consultation period. I'm speaking specifically about one part of our more detailed submission, and if I could get this up on your computer. Let's see.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's good.
Reviews. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I'll try and be really short and succinct, and I'm really referring to page 5 and 6 on our detailed submission on climate safe housing. A number of submitters have talked about the need for climate action in the city, adaptation, mitigation. We're very mindful that the city is showing or potentially showing a leadership role in New Zealand in its approach to dealing with the long emergency we're in. And the Climate Safe House project is really about trying to avoid us entering a situation where we have climate ghettos, where we have places where property changes hands, becomes cheaper, and those people who are the more vulnerable among us buy cheap property in flood zones, lose insurance, get flooded, and then become a difficult, enter into crisis. So we're working on a Climate Safe House project, year 1, final design. I'll do a bit of a rollback so you can see where it's come from. Final design of a Climate Safe House, key sponsors locked and loaded, ready to go, comms plan in place, and a building consent. Year 2, a public build, a very public build, workshops and monitoring around that enable us to talk about climate change, and all of the legal arrangements, and this is really critical, around finance, insurance, for a rolling easement potential. In year 3, the installation of the house, full public launch, workshops and monitoring, and the development of a social housing template. So the adaptation model started way back in 2016 when we had a workshop with ECA, Otago Polytech, Cozy Homes, DCC, the National Volco Trust, and a few other organisations in the city, Department of Internal Affairs, on this problem of poor quality housing, climate change, and in the flood zone. And how on earth were we going to manage that? Out of that came some early stage designs, the first exhibition, the most successful exhibition that the Blueskin Community Gallery has ever had, and a whole lot of ideas and feedback that has gone into it. In 2017-18, funded by the Deep South Science Challenge, we ran Our City, Our Climate workshops. This is around community engagement, and it's around building awareness and building a bit more of a momentum. And from that, with great city and Polytech and community support, out of that, we now move into the action plan, where we've got partner commitments from Enphase and Otago Polytech. And so now what we really want to do is unlock those solutions and unlock that investment. So Enphase is a global company that have an R&D space in Christchurch, and they've offered 50k worth of solar panels, grid-tied battery storage, home energy management system behind the meter to go into the climate safe house. We're working with the Otago Polytech on a site for the build, technical support, etc. And this is a project that is a flagship of climate change adaptation, action learning, relevant to South Dunedin and beyond, to our vulnerable communities in Dunedin. And really, how do we address the social, technical and economic challenges of adaptation? So what you'll see we've asked for in the long-term plan is what we think is a modest but really critical investment of 100k over 3 years, 100k per annum over 3 years into the Climate Safe House project. The reason why this is so important is because it's a local example of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, a combination of climate action, of increasing social equity, even of economic development. So meeting those Sustainable Development Goals, looking at a live example of innovation in household energy management, conservation, and as well as energy generation. So reducing our emissions, monitoring, education, collaborative design, and a really rich learning process. So this is really around building community support for adaptation. Getting the community behind us for the challenges we face is absolutely critical. It's all very well knowing what we have to do, but for you as our political leaders, you need to know that you've got the confidence of Dunedin behind you. It's also about a final climate safe house design and build, and we've been working with, talking with the founder of Super Homes New Zealand, Brands, etc., a number of other organisations who want to make this happen and want to see it happen. And it's about reducing emissions, household emissions, and adapting in our changing environment. And there's a few slides here that come from our research in the community about the quality of housing, about whether residents think that government, whether local or national government, is doing a lot, and you can see that at the moment they don't think we are. What do we think we need to do? And a few quotes from our qualitative research. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions. Good, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Scott. I think I'm missing something here, and I just want to unpick it a wee bit. I'm sorry if I'm asking dumb questions, it may well be.
Dumb questions are the best.
So the house that you end up with, it's not that you're asking us to invest in the actual house, it's investing in the bigger project. It's
investing in the project, core funding for the bigger project. There may be money that comes from that investment, and we would like discretion to be able to use it. The critical thing is having a key stakeholder to attract all the other investment in the project, all the other sponsors, to enable it to be built. Without that key stakeholder holding that space open, we can't do it. And so we know we've got a whole lot of sponsors who are keen to participate, but you can't build a whole house with just sponsorship. At some point you need some money to go out and buy some taps. You also need money for project management and all of those things.
No, I appreciate that, but you're not, the other way of doing this, several things. A, you're not looking for land necessarily from us as part, or that we buy into the house for social housing ourselves. You're not asking that.
No.
That won't work as part of the model.
That could work as part of the model. We'd certainly think that this is a model for social housing, but we want to be able to prove the case. We want to be able to prove the case that the type of house, a climate safe house, is suitable for social housing. So part of the outcome could be a proven case for social housing.
Is built into your model the sale of the house is what I'm asking?
No, we don't aim to sell it. We aim to have it as a community-owned asset that where its final resting place would be to replace a dilapidated home for a vulnerable person. That person loses the value of their property and pays a peppercorn rental to live in a community asset.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lord. Councillor Fiso, did you?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr Willis, for your ongoing commitment to this take, to this challenge. So I'm just following up on Councillor Wilson's question. So is it your hope that the DCC would be your key stakeholder sponsor person?
Yes, we think it's actually really important that the DCC invests in a real way in this project, because we had a comment from the Ministry for the Environment around this project, or the larger project, recently, and they said we put in a bid to lead up to the climate safe house development with a whole lot of awareness raising things as well, and they said, we love your project, it's a pity you don't have government funding support, because we would have been interested in funding it. And we think it's really important for the city to stand up and show some leadership here. So that's why it's not just the money. Money is really, really important, as we know. But it's also reputation, and it's showing that Dunedin is taking a leadership stance on climate change adaptation. That's particularly valuable, and that is demonstrable through an investment.
Okay, so what would you say to those of us around this table that would say, we believe that our role's higher level than that, than just being a sponsor, but actually, working alongside the regional council and central government on the whole picture?
I mean, I don't think you should not do that. I think you should do all of those things. The situation is urgent and it is significant, but we also need things that are motivational and that capture the community imagination. So we need something that really allows people to participate. And that top level work is so important, but so many people don't understand what it is and they don't see the outcomes, and we need to bring Dunedin along with this.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Scott. It's possible that your written submission links to something that doesn't link to something when it's in our system. I say that because it's highlighted in blue, but it's flattened as a PDF. But there's not a huge amount of detail as to what you're asking for funding for people who aren't familiar, and this is a useful high-level PowerPoint presentation. But it's a not for a not inconsiderable amount of money. It would be helpful to know what it is that you're asking us to support in a more granular detail.
So what we're looking at is a 3-year project to do final design, final consenting, comms and awareness raising to start off with. A build, a live, very public build, where I've just come from a meeting at Polytech with Robert West from the DCC, looking at where it might be. And we're looking for a very public space, so that build takes place over a year. And in the space of that year, there are workshops around climate change adaptation, around the clean tech that will be part of it. And in that process, then we work with the banks and insurance companies for an installation in a property in a flood hazard zone where there is existing dwellings, but this house is an adaptable, transportable home. And in the final year, we install that house, and we have the legal arrangements in place. We have a tenant in it, and the story keeps on being told, but in a live way. The timeline we're looking at depends entirely on the resourcing that's available and the final design. But at the moment, we would like to start the build in September next year, ideally, if we can. And we would like it we'd like it to be through 2019-2020, situated in Dunedin, workshops, and then final resting place in 2021.
Thank you. And just, if I might, just following on from Councillor Lawfessel's question, you're essentially selling us an approach to how we do community engagement and potentially adaptation. If council generally were of a mind to invest in or spend money on looking at what different approaches might look like to our community, ordinarily there'd be an RFP process or a tendering process, and I understand that you're ready to go. But do you not see there being value in testing what alternatives there are? Well, I don't know, but this is all that we have, and we're being asked to support this one thing. But it's hard to know. I mean, what's the opportunity cost of that if we haven't cast the net wider than that?
I think we all know the cost of a staff member. Well, generally, 100K per year doesn't get you a great deal when you've got a full-time position in an institution, payroll and all of those things, the administration. We have been working on this project since 2016. We've been working on climate change issues since we were born in 2008, and this has a long gestation period. So we think there's a lot of preparatory work that has gone into this, and there are a lot of connections. It's a bit like creating the hub for everything to come together. And until we get that critical investment, we can't bring all those magic parts together. So by all means we can talk, and we can talk for a lot longer, but that's not going to make things happen, and this is ready to go. So we're keen, and we do think it's important to plan and to prepare, and the most critical thing is the demonstrable engagement, real-time engagement, council and community, and we think this is one that shows that.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks for your submission, Scott. I'm going to follow up on Councillor Hawkins' question too. Because 300,000 is a fair amount of money, and we often will go out specifically asking the community about a spend that large. And can you just give me a breakdown in broad terms, how much is going to be in this would-be salary, how much would it be consulting fees for design and other such things, and then how much would be in the form of buying materials for this house?
We estimate that it'd probably be around 60% in salary. We're hopeful that most of the consulting is pro bono. Certainly our discussions have given us reason to hope in that regard. There'll probably be around 20% around community engagement and comms, so producing materials that help us get out into the community, and a remaining component for build, so actual cost. We would like to have an ability to modify that, to cut the cloth as needs must, because in a project of this scale, sometimes the sponsors don't always come in on a timely fashion, or you don't get the sponsors, the right sponsors that you want for the best kit. We're not sure of that. So we're putting it out there that this is what we estimate is critical, and we want to work with council on fine-tuning that and making it work, making it look good, making it clean, and making it responsible to ratepayers.
Thanks. And then the other one is, you said Enphase is willing to come forward, and MB has said to you that they're willing to come forward as well, based on what MBIE has said that they'll be willing.
No, we haven't. We've only had very general discussions with MB. ECA, we've had discussions. ECA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you give that correspondence to the CEO so that she could see it, and then we'll be able to see our position, to see basically
sure.
Their position as it relates to you guys?
More than welcome.
Thank you.
Councillor Lord.
Yes, Scott, actually it was another issue in your submission that I was looking at, and that was the pictures of flooding on, I was going to say Blueskin Road, but it's not, was it Blueskin Road? At Doctor's Point.
Doctor's Point.
Yeah,
Road, yeah.
I see the picture by the Black Bridge or whatever, but my question was, is that something that we've had a submission already talking about the Aramoana Road and the high seas constantly affecting that, and I was just wondering if that is a sea-related event or just a combination of sea and flooding at the same time, or flooding in particular?
It's Waitari and Long Beach, they're on alluvial floodplains, so when there's a high tide and a high inundation event, the conjuncture of those two events results in flooding. It's pure physics, that's what happens.
I guess the follow-up question I've got for that is, when you're having non-flooding events, but when you're having these extremely high tides that we've had a few of in the last year that have caused problems around the city, are they affecting you guys at Waitari?
You might notice an odour.
It's Doug. Sorry.
The septic tanks don't work very well when they're releasing into saturated ground, and so this is a public health concern in the flat-lying areas in the flood zone. So we need to think about how we manage human waste in these areas as well. Yeah.
Just for the record, he doesn't stink.
We haven't got time for a right of reply. Councillor Elder.
As you're aware, there is work being done behind the scenes about the South Dunedin project, etc., about solutions. And I was just wondering wherein your thoughts are, placing other architects who are interested in this space as well, like getting a lot more ideas around the table, and what you think about that.
No, that we think the more the merrier, as long as we have a result. So at this point, we've had a number of students and staff from Otago Polytech work on it. We've had some architectural firms look at it, but wanting to, before they move to commit to more work, they want to see that it's going to go ahead. So we anticipate, while we have high quality pro bono interest, we're not so keen to spend money on other things. And actually, the design is almost the simplest part of it. The more complicated parts are around insurance and around transferring mortgage from land, from house and property to property. Those are the more complex parts of it. So design is not the most challenging part, but by all means, we welcome we really want it to be an ideas and a public dialogue around adaptation and innovation, because there's more things in here than just climate change.
Yes, there's a lot. Yeah, it's just looking at like there's a wide range of models out there, and architects who are starting to get into this space and sort of what the thinking is in a broader sense. And I agree, there needs to be some action, but yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
And maybe this is getting into detail that I can cover with you later on if you're free, but when you said that you're doing a peppercorn rental at the end, why would you do just peppercorn if you built a new house?
Because the person, our model is to replace an existing house that a person owns, and she would lose equity in that property, but gain a warm and cosy and safe house.
So you actually know where your site is already?
We have an expectation where we'd like to put it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Scott, thank you very much for your submission. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you for the time, and I'm sorry, I'll try and get rid of this really quickly.
Ms. Williams. you're representing Dunedin Community Builders. Welcome.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora koutou katoa. As said, we're here today wearing Dunedin Community Builders hats, and we want to speak to briefly the written submission that you have received. So thank you all for taking the time to read and consider that submission. First of all, we really want to acknowledge and commend the Council for making what we believe is a visionary and essential investment in our place-based community groups throughout Dunedin City. We are obviously here, as our submission stated, in support of a $300,000 investment in communities across Dunedin, and we believe that this investment will really support the building of our communities as resilient communities, and that it allows community ownership of the achievement of council's own strategies. So they are sort of what we can really see the intention if this fund is executed well, and that these things can be achieved through this investment. Because we do understand that funding is scarce for place-based organising in Dunedin, and so for the council to invest in this way will demonstrate that commitment, but also actually enable the much creative and entrepreneurial and community building work that's already happening in the city to flourish and to help support the establishment of further community building on that level. We really believe that this fund can be co-designed with communities, that the benefits of a co-design process that demonstrates a sharing of power and decision making will really model a really collaborative way for council and community to work alongside each other. And we've also made suggestions in our submission around 3 tiers of funding to position the fund as both a sort of a scoping, a getting started level, as a capability building. Not all groups are at the same level of capacity or in the same part of their journey. And then also we really see a significant need for investment in existing groups that allow those groups who have already done a lot of their own work to really take their community's journey to the next level. So we just invite your questions in relation to our submission.
Thank you. Could I kick it off by asking you a question that the answer to which is really directed at sceptics around this sort of thing. So, given sufficient funding of place-based community groups, what changes? What would you see changing in a community as a result of successful application of funding for place-based community groups?
You want me to? Yeah. Okay. I think that the organising power of having a central point within a local community of people being able to actually coordinate the energy of how much people want to actually contribute to their own community but don't necessarily have the structures or frameworks to do so. I think that having the leadership provided on the ground that's resourced is where you will see a lot of the capacity that's already there, but isn't necessarily made use of or isn't necessarily connected. So it's that sense of cohesion and connection, and bringing a local vision together that is owned by that very, by the people of that place.
And I'd completely agree, and I'd only add, I think it's particularly important in areas low socioeconomic nature, because there's less capacity in those areas for volunteering, for giving of your time, because it's spent on other things or doing 3 jobs to make ends meet. So I think that's the only thing I would add to that.
So this references your comment in your submission that it's unrealistic for this for effort to be sustained in a low socioeconomic community on a voluntary basis.
Yeah, and I think we could only look to Brockville for that. I mean, Brockville's done some amazing, has always done some amazing things and continues to do so. But when there was a concentrated, and it feels a bit weird when Councillor Fiso's right here, but there got to be a sustained period of 3 years where there was some really hard out mahi being done in that community that once the resource was gone, the nature of which changed. There's still community input there, it's just of a different nature.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Kia ora kōrua. My question is around the desire to be involved in the co-design process. It's probably not clear in the consultation document, but the intention of this fund was essentially to give some support in the short term while options for more decentralised ways of delivering community development and supporting community development could be worked up for discussion at the next 10-year plan meeting. I'm conscious of fatigue and capacity. Would that change your submission much? I mean, essentially, if we were to go do what is being asked here, we would go through a co-design process with the community for what is hopefully a very short-term stopgap measure, while at the same time asks those same people to help us co-design a more enduring option. And I just wonder whether that's sustainable.
I have a view, but anyway, what's your view?
Well, my view is that it is important that whatever fund exists does have the elements of participation as a part of it. And I do believe that that's important, but at the same time I completely acknowledge your point that our communities actually need to be resourced to engage in a more thorough process, and that it's yes. So yes to both, if that's a position I can take.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important. I think it's a public purse, so there absolutely needs to be those accountability mechanisms built into the process. But sometimes councils develop something that might not work too well for community, and so it's having that input from the community level to make sure what's being proposed meets the needs of. And so co-design would be the ultimate, but if that takes 3 years to design, it defeats the purpose. So maybe it's a hybrid of some input into the design of how the fund works without it being the full-blown co-design.
As long as that process is recognised for what it is, and we don't get lazy and then decide that that's the end point, because I think it could be a very dynamic conversation to have with the community.
Yeah, I mean it's easy for us because we have staff whose job it is to do these things full time. It's just a chicken and egg situation you see where to resource the groups adequately to participate in the design of the fund, to allocate the money to resource them better is a difficult circular thing to get our head around.
Yeah.
And my other question was around and I take the point around the equity approach around funding and support. You wouldn't advocate for we have historically through grants boxed ourselves into corners by setting upper and lower limits around how much funding we can allocate to particular projects. You wouldn't advocate for anything that prescriptive? You're comfortable with just the high level approach that's outlined here?
Yeah, I mean, I've really grown over the years to have a thorough appreciation of the power of community. And so, and it's hard when you work in an organisation like this to think that way, but I'm reminded of our conversations at South Dunedin where I was at council and wanted to talk to organise South Dunedin better, and the energy moved to Caversham, and that's where the energy was. And so, and they're doing some marvellous things as a result of those conversation so many years ago. So that's how community works. And so whilst, yeah, it's because you don't know what community's thinking, you don't know what plans they have in place or ideas they might have. So to put limits around that without the conversation, I think it's a conversation with community. You know, we're just people who have more of a broad idea of what's happening in community. So, you know, place-based groups that exist and those ones that are starting would be who I'd target that question to.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks very much for your submission. I hear what you're saying about the design, whether design should be ahead of the money or money ahead of the design. I think, and that obviously is a very important, subtle, not so subtle necessarily difference. And I think that we are probably obviously going to evolve in how this ends up running out, rolls along. I have a question for you to consider, maybe answer or not, I don't know. When you say place-based, and we talk about having a geographical area that a group would represent, what if another group says, I have a different vision of what's good for our community and occupies the same geographic space? Are we going to look at two place-based groups in the same community because they have their own visions for the community? Or, and I think this is an important design function as we go forward, or is the council going to say, geographically, if I look at the map of Dunedin, I think this place group covers it, and then that's the group that's getting the money?
It's a really interesting question. Who knows the right answer? Because if I look at the Waikouari Coast area, you've got the Blueskin Resilience Community Trust, you have the Karatani Resilience Network, you have the Hawkesbury Lagoon Committee, you have Power, if it still goes. So, you know, there's a whole heap of community organisations in that particular area. They haven't got one for the whole North Coast. Maybe that would develop one day. And so I think it is a design question. It's working through the design around the fund works through. It's figuring out the answers to those questions and who is eligible to apply or not. You know, the other big question we had to cover off in the social wellbeing strategy was around community and acknowledging that place-based community isn't it for, you know, not everybody engages in their communities geographically, but they may engage in communities of interest. But I think this particular fund is acknowledging the importance of place. So I would think that something would need to be in there about place. But yeah, there's some of the things to grapple with when designing the fund.
So I guess do you envisage as we go forward with this that in fact there is going to be a significant amount of design in time, like as we go along, the design will need to be changed?
Yeah, but bearing in mind what Aaron's, Councillor Hawkins has said about this is a step to something else, you wouldn't want to spend all your time designing it.
No, but maybe analysing what happened with the money as it went out, like the effectiveness of it and how people felt about where it went and what was good and what wasn't. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Worship. I have a question that follows on from that quite nicely, which is around timing, because it's been my observation that as communities ebb and flow over time and different people come in and some people leave, that their sense of community changes somewhat or their needs change. So would it be important to do this very carefully, this designing what was needed, but not too fast, not too slow, for those reasons? Would that be a reasonable assumption?
I think it's always going to be a dynamic process. I am aware, as you know, I wear multiple hats, so I am aware of a general sense of fatigue out there in our wider community amongst community workers. So I wouldn't want it to be a laboured process because people actually need some action and something to change relatively soon. But I think it's at its core, it needs to be a dynamic process, and probably on a philosophical level, you know, just also in response to Councillor O'Malley's question, is that the dynamic process, I think, is that we don't necessarily always need consensus in community, that the place for creative energy is often in the tension between community visions. So I think that it's about having a having a process that can be responsive to that and that can work with, and so it's not going to always be tidy, because well, the one thing we do know is that community can be messy, but in a good way. So.
Thank you, that's a very helpful answer.
Okay, thank you very much for your submission. Appreciate it. Mr. Burks. Welcome.
Thank you. Cheers.
You're representing the Otago University Students Association.
Yes, I am. I'm the postgraduate officer for OUSA.
Very welcome. Next 5 minutes are yours.
Thank you. I'll try to be very brief for you. So OUSA really wanted to just make 3 general points, I think, as you can see from the document we presented. The first one is that we're thankful for the engagement opportunity that we've had, and we're thankful that you can hear us. Oh, do you want me to be closer? Is this better? Yep. So the first point we'd like to say is just thank you for hearing us, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to contribute to this process in any way that we can. It's really wonderful. On the note of engagement, I think we'd like to note that engagement for students is a little bit different than it might be for engagement with a lot of the community. If only for the fact that we roll over much more than other people in the community do. By that I mean that, you know, you get a cohort of students, they come in first year, they'll be here for 3 years, maybe for a year of postgraduate study, and then they're likely to move out of Dunedin. That seems to be the way in which things work. So consulting with students very much requires a process that's much more ongoing than it might be for the wider community, though I wouldn't necessarily know for certain. The second thing was that we'd like to stress the importance of putting some more plans for health, I think, into this 10-year plan. Any way that we can would be really wonderful. As far as students are concerned, there's a bit of a mental health issue going on right now. Some people would say it's a crisis, other people would at least say that it's very serious. Any opportunities for funding to the community to benefit any mental health initiatives that will be happening during the next 10 years, to build upon facilities for that, would be very, very welcome and would be absolutely fantastic, and would see the support of, I imagine, the university, but definitely at least of OUSA. Finally, just that students are very environmentally focused these days. Much more so than they may have been perhaps, but definitely it's a theme that's coming up, that we are very supportive of any initiatives that look after the environment, for sure, 100%, absolutely in favour of those sorts of things. But we'd also like to see some care for the local environment that we feel like we aren't getting enough of, and by we I at least mean that cohort of students who spoke to me and some members of OUSA, that we would like to see an increase in the amount of litter collection that's going on around student areas, an opportunity for further recycling, even just larger blue bins, these small practical things, perhaps composting facilities that would just let students engage in their local environment in a way that they felt was healthier, that they felt contributed better to the community around them, and that also didn't deteriorate the local area quite like it might do now. I think that's about everything. I'll wait for your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and thanks for coming along. Some of us graduate and don't make it very far. I'm interested in your comments around engaging with students is different, or there are different cohort of people. And we certainly, any of us who sat on the local alcohol policy hearing where it was suggested that bars might close earlier is certainly aware that students will get engaged in issues that they see as directly affecting them. But what advice, or what advice can OUSA give us in terms of doing that more effectively, given that this is something that is your everyday work, I suppose?
Yeah, it's honestly something that we find tricky. OUSA rolls over every year. We are elected as new people in new positions sometimes, and sometimes there isn't even any one from a previous executive on the new executive, so that continuity changes even for us. I think the most important thing you can do for student engagement is to first provide plenty of things of value and to make it known that you are the provider of those things. That gets student attention. That gets people paying attention to you, coming to where you are. And then when you ask them a question, they're more likely to have already seen your presence, heard your brand, and therefore actually engage and feel like they'll get something out of it. The second thing I'd say is being very, very transparent about what you heard, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'll do about it. Is there another opportunity to have another consultation about that, for people to do these oral submissions? That stuff is really wonderful, and people like feeling at least like they've been directly heard, even if you disagree and you don't like it. That way they feel like there's a conversation that's going on there. I'd say the third thing is that there's a tendency for people to mistake consultation with information. And if you've not managed to get the information out there enough, the consultation sessions essentially turn into information sessions where students, though anybody who hasn't heard, have to spend a lot of time processing information they may not have heard and then make up a reaction on the fly, which they may have a very different feeling about a week from now, a month from now, when they've had time to really let it settle in and to live their life with the information in mind.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Councillor O'Malley.
It's a very quick one related to your waste management point. Students for environmental action also came and presented here and had very similar points on this. When we're looking for groups to consult with, we're looking for stakeholder groups. Would they be a good group to work with? Like, would they work with OUSA and be able to work with us, or are they simply a club and therefore OUSA is another entity? Not simply a club, but a club.
Completely upfront, honest answer, I don't know. I would imagine both. It would depend on who's in charge and working in that community, and then who's in charge and working in our community too. The fact that we roll over year after year can really change some personal politics things as well as others. Best to do both, I would say, if possible.
Or may I suggest that when you're doing your policies, you've got some clubs that may be able to act as ancillary to your own activities, and they might be able to be a funnel and maybe more consistent because they'll have their turnover.
Yeah, it's something that some clubs start up, they're very passionately looked after for a few years, and then once that person leaves the university, they collapse again, and it's not always possible to keep hold of them, but we do try.
Councillor Gary.
Your Worship, thank you for your submission. I'm really interested to hear some practical suggestions from you about the wheres and when of consulting with students. So just to give you context for that, my experience was I was invited into a lecture to talk about the 10-year plan, and that particular group of students was doing a submission for their assignment, so they were very engaged and were encouraged to put in a real submission as well. We also went into the university area and did a consultation as well. I just wondered if you had any practical ideas about other things we could be doing. We've heard from a number of young people, and it would be great to hear your ideas about this point.
It's a very tricky one. I feel like if I were to give you advice right now as to what works for me, it would be advice that might not be effective because I'm the exception that heard about the information. So I'm inherently the wrong person to ask. But then again, you can't find the right people to ask or you wouldn't have this problem. It's something we're currently trying to solve ourselves as well. I couldn't give you an answer right now. It's something I'd love to work with you on though, and collaboratively I'd be very keen to spend the rest of my time at OUSA working with you to solve this problem, but I can't give you an answer that's meaningful right now. Sorry.
Thank you for your submission.
That's all right, thank you.
Illuminating, and we will undoubtedly endeavour to come back to you and collaborate on it.
Okay.
Because we struggle year on year interacting with our student body, which is extremely important to the city, and any ways we can do that better, we'll be receptive to.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Cheers.
Mr. Baddock. Welcome all.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm here as part of Transforming Dunedin. We made a joint submission between Transforming Dunedin and a number of my fellow Creative Dunedin Partnership members. I'm Alan Baddock. I'm a Dunedin filmmaker and screenwriter.
Scott Muir. I am on the, for my sins, the Midland Carnival Trust, the Street Art Trust, the Local Street Party Trust, and others.
Kia ora tātou. I'm Jonathan Hendry, Director of Fortune Theatre and also on the Creative Dunedin Partnership.
Ka mihinga ka koutou, ko Katihui Rapa Te Hapu, ko Vicky Lena Hanaho. I represent Toi Māori on Transforming Dunedin panel, and I come from active involvement in community arts production, also a practicing artist.
So thank you for this time to speak to our submission. We're not going to go into a lot of detail about it because it's most of what we needed to say is there in the written submission. First off, I'd just like to congratulate the council and say we're greatly encouraged at the improved financial situation of the city that has led to this being a rather more ambitious plan than what we've seen in the past. When Transforming Dunedin first formed and started making submissions to the council, we were very mindful of the city's rather straitened circumstances, and we're very mindful that actually we had to look for ways of doing things that didn't involve spending money because there was no money to be spent. So it's very encouraging to find that that situation has changed. So I just want to make some very quick points, really. I note from the draft 10-year plan, it talks about the need to build on our strengths and think about the sort of city we want to be living in the next 10 years or longer. The city's creative sector is a recognised strength of the city. We've been making submissions now to the council for the last 8 years, and the feedback we've had is that message has been taken on board, and it is a recognised strength. The city has gained a lot of headlines up and down the country for introducing Aratoi and being the first in the country to introduce an arts and culture strategy. It seems to us logical to anticipate signs in the 10-year plan of building on the strength. It seems logical to anticipate signs in the 10-year plan of the sort of things that the city will pursue in the arts and cultural sector in the next 10 years. The council states that the focus of the past 5 years has been on paying off debt and restricting rates rises, and yet it proposes no increase in spending to support and develop the creative sector in the coming decade of doing big new things. Where is the boldness? Where are the exciting things planned for the creative sector? How can a decade of big new things amount to restricting activity in the arts and culture to the same level as during the past period of straitened financial times? That's really the single message that we come with is where is the arts in the 10-year plan? What are you going to do in the next 10 years? What's the city going to put in the plan to support and harness the benefits that have been recognised from development in the arts and culture sector? Quoting from Covis Ments during the consultations on the draft economic strategy for the city, spending on the arts has a return on investment of 11 to 1. For every dollar you spend on the arts, you get a return to the city of $11, compared with a return on spending on roading of $3 to $4. And yet, when you look at the spending on libraries and museums, as quoted in the budget, comes to $243 million. The spending on roads comes to $876 million. It suggests that if you actually invested more in the arts, the return could be quite astronomical, and yet the balance goes the other way. The minimal spending on the arts and a lot of spending on roading. That's really, it's a question we come with really in terms of saying we've had the support, we've had the adoption of the strategy, we've had the mayor and the deputy mayor in the past talk about how dynamic the creative sector has been shown to be, and you yourself, Mr. Mayor, talking about the tip of the iceberg and the city not recognising just what potential is there. And so we're really asking, where is the evidence of this in this 10-year plan?
I just want to reiterate the point that I put before you 2 years ago in talking to the economic policy for the city, that the general wellbeing, the whole order of our entire community, not just Māori, can be improved by seeing ourselves reflected back to us in our city. When we see our own stories, we feel better about the place that we live, who we are, and that improves general health, spiritual, physical, mental, is then reflected back to our visitors, and that's an economic benefit for Dunedin. And we see this being reflected nationwide too, with the championing of what's unique about us on the world stage being reflected back to us in very positive ways. I want to reiterate too that what's good for Māori is good for all of our citizens. When we see ourselves positively reinforced by our city, by our municipality, then we feel better about who we are and where we live. And also to remind you that the stories of our landscape are unique, and that the stories can be best told by local artists, and we'd like to see that championed in our full plan. Thank you.
Got one more small thing to add, a question and a comment. What's Dunedin's GDP annually? I couldn't find it in this document. Can anybody tell me what that is?
Well, I've just had 4 billion thrown up.
4 billion. Okay, so the comment is on page 11. It talks about the arts and recreation services sector having a net 1.4% decline. I can't do that in my head, but lots of other sectors are moving ahead, and the arts and recreation services seem to have gone down by 1.4%. I'd like to think that perhaps as an aspirational goal, the city could set turning that around and moving it up into the same area that all the other services are working in. And that may be a way for the council to be seen to actually be doing something beyond business as usual with the arts and culture strategy.
Thank you for listening. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Yep, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, and a timely reminder of how we do these things. But I'm just wondering what funding, because it is a financial one rather than the arts strategy. The action plan, and I can't remember it, I'm sorry, I've been thinking about other things like roads and boring, things like that. What action plans need funding, and what is the dollars that you're looking for? Or is it not that easy?
It's not that easy. I mean, we tried to set out in the submission a list of areas where we see the potential for further city support.
Yep.
We haven't put dollar figures on it. We didn't come along specifically asking for dollars. Where we have been at pains over now quite a number of years to convey the fact that there is a great benefit to the city by supporting and investing in this area. But I mean, we've never been coming along saying we want X amount of dollars for this or that. It's mainly about getting recognition that the city planners should be looking in this area. As one illustration, in the 10-year plan, the draft budget for economic development specifically excludes art and culture from areas that are affected by the 10-year plan for economic development. It ticks the boxes for all the other strategies and omits ticking the box for arts and culture. The implication is that the city's economic planners do not see any interaction between economic development and arts and culture.
They did do the Ed Sheeran painting. Yeah, we'll fund that, but yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, what we're really looking for is for signs that the city planners and the council have this at the forefront of their mind and are looking for ways to boost to develop this area, rather than coming along wanting a handout for a particular project.
Okay, and the reason I ask it is because we've now got things like art and infrastructure as a policy in the framework, but you're saying it needs to be less subtle than that.
I think it needs to be more widespread than that, and it needs to be in a 10-year plan that is being put up as an ambitious and bold plan for the next 10 years. It's hard to find anything more than modest, with the possible exception of a bridge. But I mean, it specifically talks about business as usual, as regards Aratoi. And that's business as usual, as I said before, from a 5-year period that's recognised as being one that was financially constrained. So it just seems like it could benefit from some further thinking and perhaps looking at what could be added into the plan that might measure up on that category of being bold and visionary.
So it may actually be words and focus of, rather than actual dollar terms, because there may well be a lot of dollars in there that can tick the arts box. We just haven't joined the dots.
Well, I mean certainly it's one of the points I had noted was that in reading through the plan, it felt as though we were being asked for approval of a blank cheque in terms of there's a lot of talk about big projects like the redevelopment of the CBD and redevelopment of the tertiary precinct, but there's no detail there. There's talk about more public art, but whether that more public art is 2 paintings and a statue, or whether it's a large chunk of that sort of $100 million, it's impossible to tell. So it's impossible to be terribly supportive when there's actually no detail and there's no specificity. There's nothing specific, that we can actually focus on and say, yeah, that's great.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you all for coming. Just a question, I guess, around the economic value, if you like, around the sector. And I acknowledge that it is a theme under Aratoi, but it's not a particularly prominent theme under our economic development strategy. Are you aware that at the 5-year mark, the economic development strategy is this year going through its mid-term review, which would offer you the opportunity to submit on making it more prominent in the work that department does, / unlocking the funding that is available to that strategy to implement it?
I wasn't aware. No, sure.
Can I answer that? In direct, the way that when the original economic development strategy was placed, and when we submitted to it, Councillor Staines got up and said to us at the end, clearly we've missed arts and culture here, we've made a huge mistake, we better fix that, and that was 5 years ago when that strategy was implemented. So it doesn't give me a lot of confidence that we could submit to it again and hear that the arts and culture sector is being heard, given we've just gone through 5 years of economic development, that policy and nothing's happened. They did tell us at the launch of the strategy how great it was to hear from the outset, but there's been no real gains that I can see.
Before my time, unfortunately, and I'd like to think that both this body and a lot of the key stakeholders that inputted into the development of that strategy have moved significantly since then. So please don't let that deter you from being a part of that process. Thanks.
It would be, can I just suggest, it would be greatly encouraging. It would be a big encouragement for us to make such a submission to the review of the draft economic strategy if the 10-year plan draft was modified to address our concerns, because at the moment we make a lot of submissions. We basically say the same thing each time we come along and make a submission. We get a lot of verbal acceptance, but we don't see it being reflected in the results. So if you want to actually have a reconsider of the 10-year plan and make some significant changes there, we would be hugely encouraged, and we'd be along in numbers to submit to the review of the economic strategy. But the asset is here really.
Councillor Benson-Pope. Thank you, Worship. Just looking at the movement and the Council's policy decisions around Aratoi, around the infrastructure, art and infrastructure policy, I would have thought you being a little unfair in saying the plan is modest. I mean, I don't think it's fair just to talk about the bridge. I mean, $60 million for street works that are more than just infrastructural improvements. I wouldn't describe as modest, nor would I include that as a $20 million in the campus for other work to enhance one of our major industries. And that list goes on quite a lot. So don't you think you're being a little uncharitable saying this is the proposals are only modest?
What I was suggesting before is that actually it's difficult to be clear in this as to what parts of that spending relate to arts and culture and what parts relate to planting trees and paving streets. I mean, if I've missed something, then I apologise. But I mean, I went through the document, the consultation document. We went through the consultation document, and it wasn't clear to us.
Well, I think that's a fair criticism, and we share that. A number of us, or the majority probably around the table, share that frustration about the fact that we don't have any more specificity around that work, because it's been delayed because of staff issues and other timing issues for longer than many of us would have liked. But we're on the point of getting out to talk to our community development plan, our panel about that, and I think sorry, this isn't a question, but other people can get away with it, so can I. The sort of input we're getting from you today will help keeping that focus in the right place, I think. So thank you.
If I can just say that we recognise that at least part of the problem may be a communication problem. And if those sums that you mentioned are intended to be spent in this area, then fantastic. But that hasn't come across, so it may be just a communication problem, and it may be that in finalising the plan, it's just a matter of actually identifying where that arts and culture spending is. At the moment, it's not evident.
Thank you, Mark. Chief Executive would like to make a couple of comments.
I think it's probably a timing issue more than anything else, in that those major areas of spend, with the exception of the bridge, where we have a very well designed, well thought out, you can see its artistic componentry, or with regard to the other two, that level of detailed design's not yet been done either around the Centre City plan or the University precinct. It is intended that generally, I don't know, maybe 10%, maybe if we just did a replacement of infrastructure in the CBD, for example, you might be talking $6 or $8 million to just replace the pipes and just replace the road back on top. But once you start talking about public art and plantings and gardens and PO and all sorts of other things designed to reflect who we are, then that's what you're seeing signalled in the price. Once you get the budget in place, then the work starts on the design, and then of course that will all come back to the community. So I think you're right to say you're looking forward to the next piece, because it's not spelled out in this document, is because the work's not done yet. It's here's the plan to put the budget in to start the work. So you'll start to see it, and you'll start to be consulted on it whatever decision the councillors make as that level of funding rolls out and the design work gets underway.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Councillor Garrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your submission. Great to see you all here. First time I've heard you make a submission, so some of the things you're talking about are prior to my time. But my question was an odd one, probably, in that this is a looking forward plan, but I just wondered if you'd reflect on something Council has done, something concrete that has got you excited, that you thought was bold, just to get a sense of how you view things. In question.
The first and immediate thing that springs to mind is adopting an arts and culture strategy. Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I just want to ask a couple of questions around your sense of satisfaction as to where we're spending operational costs right now. I mean, the EDU does have a person full-time on arts and music in the EDU, which would be proportional to other industries around about what we allocate in terms of staffing, which is generally one person around each area. Is that insufficient in your mind, or
It's not sufficient.
It's not sufficient?
No, from a practitioner and a delivery point of view, that this is a dearth scene in the whole country, but in particular in a city where we push our arts and culture personality forward as a draw card, and also in communicating to our own people about who we are, that yes, there needs to be more support for those staff members, but also more support for the work that they do in the community that they service.
Do you have a sense of that, how that support would look?
No, I don't. That's not my expertise.
Okay. And to the Sammy's, I believe, is in the budget, isn't it not? The refit of Sammy's?
The long term.
Yep, 5 million.
There's a 5 million, so it's not necessarily the full refit, but there's a placeholder there. So I guess there is at least some performance arts recognition in there, and I guess the point would be that Councillor Benson Pope really raised, and the CEO clarified, is that a lot of the spend that we're putting aside is that we've got to put aside the spend now in this document, and then the fine detail of how it's going to get spent comes later, and obviously you want to be involved in that fine detail.
Certainly, I mean, it's heartening to hear that actual figures, actual dollars are being destined to be put aside, but I think what we're highlighting here is the general zeitgeist and the general intention in the words of the document that it's stated that there is real value placed on the arts and culture sector.
That's perhaps absolutely the nub of it. That the document and the plan at the moment does not reflect the sense that that the council or the city actually sees particular value in this area. We see it in the city's marketing, where it talks about this wonderful creative city, but when you come and look at the plan, that message isn't there. The spending may be there, but the message isn't. And in terms of getting the rest of the community to adopt and support that whole view, you know, having the council lead by saying we think this is important and we're putting it up here as a headline item, rather than, oh yeah, it's in there, but we're not going to talk about it. You know, it's so again, as I said before, it may just primarily be a communication problem, and if it is, that's fantastic. That's easy to fix.
So a good position in design and implementation as we go forward, high representation of the arts.
Yep, and seeing it reflected in all the council documents.
That go with that, yep.
Councillor Benson Pope, do you have a question now?
I have a question. We are often told, and have been during this process, that we shouldn't spend anything until we've got infrastructure X corrected and so on. What would you say to people who present that argument to us?
I'd just like to reiterate that this increased visitation and the value of presenting ourselves positively, that would start to have real financial dividends, and that would start to pay for some of the things that we need to place with, you know, whether that's canals for South Dunedin or new pipes where they've blown somewhere else. You know, that the more that we talk up who we are and show everybody else how wonderful we are, the more people will want to come and see that and spend their hard-earned money in our town.
Man does not live by bread alone. That's what you're saying.
That's right.
Can I just add to that, David, that it's not that hard to integrate this stuff into infrastructure, and the thinking that's gone on in some of the departments makes it hard because it's how we've always done it.
And I'd just offer up the street art as an example of something that has a direct impact on visitation. Yeah, I've got at home a whole collection of notebooks and books and photos from Penang when I went there a number of years ago, and we stumbled across some street art, and we spent the rest of our the last 3 days we had there, just going down around the city, tracking down more, because it was of Penang, and the street art in Dunedin has that same effect. People want to go to a city and see what is distinctive about that city, and it comes back to what Vicky was saying about we need to tell our own stories and reflect ourselves, and that comes about by facilitating local artists to do what local artists do. It's great to have Ed Sheeran come to town and bring a whole lot of people to fill up the bars and the hotels, but what makes Dunedin distinctive in the long term is having its own culture reflected and being able to see what local artists are doing here that you cannot see anywhere else in the world.
Thank you for a very stimulating submission. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For your time.
Thanks very much. Thanks for listening, and good luck. Good luck with the rest.
Mr. Murphin. Welcome. You are representing the Andersons Bay Tennis Club.
Yes, as an individual, I've been the club captain there for 30 years, and I've got John Guthrie, who's the president of our club, who's been involved in the club for 50 years. I'm also...
Scary.
I'm also rep selector of our Otago rep teams. I also organise the Winter Business House Tennis League at the Eager Centre and have had a long involvement in tennis in my 30 years in Dunedin. My submission was just to talk about the Logan Park Tennis Centre. Tennis Otago will have put in their own submission about their courts, and I'm sure Sport Otago will be talking about their facilities as well. Just the purpose of the presentation is to put the building redevelopment at Logan Park, specifically the tennis centre, back on the 10-year plan. There had been some work done recently on it, and with staffing changes it had been put on hold, but the tennis centre and the users of that area is sort of the last piece in the puzzle of what's happening at Logan Park. I mean, I've played at Logan Park. It's a fantastic vista, great climate, fantastic for our sport, and a beautiful part of town. The university students that come here can't believe how good a spot we've got. I grew up in Christchurch. I'm really happy that I live in Dunedin. It's a fantastic venue down at Logan Park. And in that vein, the building actually provides an opportunity for shared use down at Logan Park. Currently it's being shared by the Polytech and the Tennis Centre, and there could be potential for, commercial space as well. I mean, you could have upstairs a commercial space with great vistas. So with that in mind, recently I'll hand round this little chocolate box. The South Seas exhibition was done in 1925. They spent £100,000 on the South Seas exhibition. It was a big spend. It was an Australasian expo. It brought a lot of new ideas too. You can open it up. You can have a look. Yeah, no, they're well going. So my
take all the hard ones.
My wife's grandmother worked there. My grandfather visited there. As the arts and culture people said, we've got to look at our past, look at our art, and look at what can be done in that zone. So, it is of historical significance, that area, and I think in 2025 we should be commemorating that and doing something towards that area. So, with the tennis centre, we can host really good events there. If we can do up our building, the courts can be done up as well. The tennis are going to talk to that in time. It'll bring more visitors. But I'll hand over to John to just back up my comments that I've made so far.
Thank you. I think it's probably 55 years, not 50 years there, but I'm older than I look. I think this submission is all about completing a puzzle down at Logan Park. I think a number of times I've presented to this forum about what should be done there, and I think it is the last piece of the puzzle that needs to be looked at and completed. I think it's interesting listening to that excellent presentation just before about the whole concept of economic development, and I think A lot of that is to do with bringing money in from the outside, in addition to having good infrastructure for the locals and things like that. But a lot of the work I've done with the Highlanders over the last few years points to the fact that people make a decision to go to a location. There's always one reason that they go, but increasingly they're looking for those additional things that will justify their decision to go to an event such as a Highlanders match or Masters Games or whatever it might be. So I think it's important to ensure that we have that facility available as a world-class facility in this sport. But I think what Philip is also saying is there is the opportunity to not just complete the puzzle in terms of the courts and the pavilion, but also looking at economic development opportunities in terms of that building. With the Highlanders, as I say, most of the people who are coming, many of the people who are coming from outside this venue are doing additional things, and I think it's about understanding what Brand Dunedin is all about. And I think we've seen recently with that bloke who came to some concerts in February that we can do it. We can play in the big stage, and I think it's about what does Brand Dunedin mean. And I think Brand Dunedin, in addition to the arts and all of the other things we could talk about, means a centre for sporting excellence. And we've got some great stuff going on in the city under Sport Otago and everything that's going on down there. So I think my final comment is I think to complete that and to be attractive, we should put that final puzzle in place. Philip is very passionate about the South Seas exhibition. My personal view is I think that building has done its time, but it's the venue that is historic, and I think that's an important part of what we are as Dunedin people. So, yeah, thank you.
Just one last thing is, if the venue is done up, we could be hosting Davis Cup. We would have more visitors coming to town. Our tennis centre would be well regarded. In tennis, we are the southern region head here in Dunedin, so Invercargill, Southern Lakes all come to our venue, and they use the Edgar Centre, which is a fantastic venue. Every day I'll think about how it's great that Ion Edgar donated $500,000. The council paid $2.5 million for the building 20 years ago, and it's a fantastic venue that we've got. And as John says, if we can get the development thing done at the tennis centre, that can, put the puzzle together, and it's a fantastic sporting venue with the hockey, cricket, athletics, rugby, all there. There's not many other places in New Zealand that have got such a great hub.
Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, remind me what the contribution was that you were seeking.
So my contribution is that just recently the council were looking at spending money on the building and taking ownership of the building. So that's what I was seeking in the 10-year plan, and the Logan Park Tennis Centre. The centre, it's not the actual tennis courts? No, because that was also part of that. Yeah. Personally, and from our club, it's just the building. Just the building, thank you. Yeah.
Councillor O'Malley.
The Logan Park redevelopment has been, been going on for quite a substantial amount of time, and I asked this of Sport Otago, is that at least whatever happens in the budget, should we be at least keeping the plan that where we've got to at this point in terms of the general structure of Logan Park being kept front and centre?
Yep. And
then maybe considering single projects at a time going forward. And obviously you're asking, like everybody else is, that your project be put to the top of that list.
Yep.
Well, and I think the key thing here is to get it back on the 10-year plan is what we want to see. And I think when you look at the courts down there, they're health and safety risk. Who wants that? That's one side of it. That's not what we're here for today. But when you look at the building, fantastic history, but it's rubbish really. And I think to have a quality piece of that puzzle, we should have a better facility there, and there are commercial opportunities behind that.
With that larger overarching plan, the actual orientation of the tennis courts has been always an issue in terms of fitting in around everybody else. So it sort of ends up becoming an all or nothing investment there, does it not, when it gets to changing that area, in terms of the tennis courts and the building?
Yeah, one of the things is that the tennis courts would probably reduce size slightly, 16 courts, then we can host big events. If we go less than 16 courts, we can't. But the orientation of the courts is quite important when you're playing the sport. You know, that where the sun is and that sort of thing that had been, you know, designed. I'm sure that's been talked about. So that's my answer to your question.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much for your submission. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Parker. Welcome.
Hello. So, I'm here representing BRAG, Blueskin Recreational Access Group, but I'm also here as a private individual and also a business owner. I've got 2 or 3 things I want to discuss within that. Firstly is that within the Dunedin area, we have got a lot of these open, unformed legal roads, known as paper roads, and out in the Blueskin area, we've got probably about 50 kilometres of them, and at the moment, a lot of them are not accessible for the general public. So landowners have assimilated them into their properties, and many of them are denying us access to the coast. So there is a coastal margin that runs all the way from Warrington Beach all the way through to Seacliff, which would make the most fabulous walk. I've done it now 2 or 3 times. It runs along the edge of the coast, and if you could imagine what that looks like on a sunny day, it's just stunning. It also connects back up onto Coast Road in 2 or 3 places. Then we've got paper roads that go from Coast Road through to the Kilmog and then connect up to the Silver Peaks. And what I'm saying is that we've got this very underutilised resource, and my recommendation is that the council look at doing a stock take to see what they've got there and see how they can better be utilised for the general public. Some of them are fantastic for cycling. I'm a cyclist, so I have an electric bike business, and some of those steep hills would be absolutely ideal for me to get bikes onto. But at the moment, for me to use a public road, I actually have to ask permission because there are signs and lock gates and those sorts of things. Then, as part of our group, we also came across a plan that was put to the council a few years ago in regards to widening or putting in a cycle path that connects Evansdale to Waitati, or Waitati to Evansdale. Those 2 communities are really cut off from each other, even though, you know, we're less than a few hundred metres apart by State Highway 1. It's a very, very dangerous piece of road. I don't think there's been any fatalities, and when the road was had major upgrades about 8-9 years ago, it was widened slightly, so the shoulder on either side is actually has been improved. But there is actually on the council records a plan of a cycleway lane using some of the rail corridor there. And I just think that that would be a really fantastic thing to be sort of looking at. As a group, we've been starting to talk about it, and we've got other people who are starting to get in touch with us saying, okay, we would like that to happen as well. So that's really it.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor
Thank you. That is an NZTA road, being State Highway, but what you're asking is that we, and it's actually the Regional Land Transport Committee who would need to have it in their books and potentially on our books as well, or NZTA's books, for funding from the government. I'm going to ask a rhetorical question because I do know the answer. I know that there's a submission coming in from, because I've read it, the Tunnels Trust, and they've said that we need to be planning for the northern routes as well, and right. They're asking us to put line items in our plan because if we don't have line items, then we can't get our national transport funding for them. So have you any idea what those would cost, or have you done any work with Kiwi Rail or anyone else on those? No, literally this landed on our plate sort of midway through last year. We initially sort of thought maybe we wouldn't even go there, and then we were at a community board meeting up at Waikouaiti, and then we came across this plan that had been submitted
by Rhys Owen, I think, who works for Opus, and yeah, and it's like, whoa, okay, this is great. So yeah, no idea, but also it would also be using some of the corridor there, which runs along beside the railway line as well. So there's rail corridor.
Yep. I hope it's more than 5 metres away.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it would have to be a mix of the two.
Yeah.
And it really is. It's at the moment a lot of cyclists are going out to Waititi and then turning around.
Yeah.
Or they're taking their bikes and parking at Evansdale and doing through to Karatani, doing that part there. You know, that little piece of road. It's only what 3 to 5 k's, but it is a real bottleneck and it's a hindrance to cyclists. And we've got to the stage now where people are commuting in from Waititi on a regular basis because it's now doable, or very much doable, on electric bikes. Warrington, Seacliff, Karatani, those places will also be doable in the near future. And it's just that long-term vision for how can we bring these cyclists through to Dunedin.
Thank you.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thanks for your presentation. Are you familiar with what happened with the similar issue of the paper roads on the peninsula in particular, where Public Access New Zealand, Bruce Mason, put a lot of effort into developing the walk from, that still sort of exists, from the inlet, from the, what do you call it at Tomahawk, the lagoon up to the Soldiers Memorial, and a couple of other routes that where the same problem was encountered with a lot of people who'd assimilated the land and were alienating it. Is that part of your history of? No, look, we're very much a separate group, but we're also aware of there's a whole lot of other groups trying to do similar type of things. Yeah, I'm just raising that because we've been there, and it was fraught. And what you've got is a bigger version of it. I'm not pushing back on it.
Yeah, yeah.
So what you want is a stock take of what's there and a report to us about what might be done incrementally, I guess.
Yeah, as a private individual, it's really, taking this on, I probably was naive, thinking, here is a ULR, let's just open it up, I'm sure the landowner won't mind. Well, actually, the landowners do mind, and they don't want to relinquish that which they have now deemed as being their own.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So that raises the issue of two issues really. What you see as your rights, given that that is public land, they're not the landowner.
No, that's right.
And secondly, what is it that you're wanting council support for? It's more than just doing a stock take. I assume you're asking for some action to enforce public access, which, as I understand it, is a legal right. No one can stop you going on those roads as they're public roads at the moment, if you know where they are.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what we're using is various apps. We're using Walking Access Commission as people to bounce things off. We have a field officer who we're working with. And no, that's not what we're asking of the council, because we're going through the community board first, because we're trying to keep it local and trying to build up those relationships rather than coming in with a sledgehammer just to crack those small nuts. And we're getting a lot of opposition, but at the same time we're also seeing success. We opened up a little tiny stretch of Meadow Road, which is in Warrington. It just links Church Road to Hill Road, and we have got the track. It's just literally, it's just people have walked, and now we have got this well-formed track where people are going through, and it's made a huge difference to the community. Yeah, and from a long-term perspective, I'm not looking at there being bridges and infrastructure. I'm looking for a piece of triangle, orange here, another one over there, so people know where they're going. That's all it is. But it's an awareness that these are open roads, they've never been closed, and that the council has a lot of them on their books.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Matter.
Thanks, Nathan, and we'll catch up again, obviously, at the community board meetings. The point about the cycleways, a lot of the other areas have trusts, and it's useful when you're trying to put together an Otago map to have somebody take over the effort for us a defined geographical region. So do you think you guys would be willing to basically stump up as a trust group that would be willing to take over, at this point at least, keeping an eye on the development of that section of cycleway so that we can get it into our plans and then start figuring out how we fit in all those things?
Yeah, look, that's right. So we've already sort of started talking with Spokes, because they were a logical partner there, and a certain amount of energy that they've already put into themselves. So yeah, you know, and what we're doing is we have track champions. So different people within the group are going, okay, look, this is what I'm looking at doing. This is what I'm doing. And at the moment, we've got one person who's designated to that piece of State Highway 1. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your submission.
Lovely. Thank you.
Mr. Schmidt. Welcome.
Thank you for hearing us. I've brought my neighbour along as well, since what
Welcome to you as well.
Saying
Clunin.
because of the effects here. We put several submissions in, but we're just going to talk, or would like to talk about our right-of-way, which is beside the reserve, which means people always walk over our right-of-way and do not use the reserve because there's no footpath there. And that's what's very dear to our hearts. We've been there for 26 years when the subdivision was formed, and you've been there for 10 years, isn't it? We have tried to talking to council staff, but we haven't got any further, and we were just told it's a matter to put in the long-term plans, so that's why we're here in the first place. I'm not sure, have you got our submissions, or you? Yes. So yes. You know the area what we're talking about in Hadley Close. We have a long driveway from Hadley Close, which goes down to R2 property number 2 and 6, and beside that is a beautiful reserve, because it's lovely placed, and from that reserve there's a walkway goes between our two properties down to Leafton Close. It goes down a 6-acre old footpath down to the bottom. When that reserve was finalised and finished, we were told there was only so much money for the footpath, so the footpath came that far up, it stopped about 20 metres before where we drive across the reserve land, and then the reserve in Hadley Close is above that. People now walk up and down because they go to the bus, they go for walks, etc. It's used quite a bit. When they come to the grass strip, they walk the wee grass strip up to where we have our driveway, but then it looks like the natural way to go over our driveway, walk up our driveway. We have tried several ways trying to discourage that because it's actually quite dangerous when we come out of our driveways. It's hard to see people there. And the people who, for our own families, etc., we can warn them and say, be very careful when you're on there, but for other people we can't. And that's one of the big problems. And we have cyclists coming down, we've got kids on skateboards coming down, etc. Now, for the council to put the footpath in, they can do it nicely along the reserve. There's ample room there. It's not a problem. It's just to allocate the money in order to do that. And that will alleviate the problem. Do you want to say more on that?
No, I think you've covered it. Yeah.
Okay. I'd have to say I'm surprised that you've been advised that this is a long-term plan issue. It doesn't sound like it to me, but I think we can direct this to. I think we can direct this to operation. And I'm not being critical.
No, I'm fine. If that's the case of going forward, and I'm very happy with that. I presume you'll be the same.
Yes, yeah, no, appreciate that. Okay.
All right.
So are you happy to take questions?
Yep.
Or anything anyone needs clarification on? It's a very comprehensive submission, and we've read it, so we know what the issues are. With regard to Hadley Close, though, we will refer it to our operational staff and ask them to find some resolution, because I don't see it as a long-term plan issue. I see it as an operational issue around the footpath.
So long as it gets looked at, and I think that's what we want.
Yep.
So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. White. No, Mr. White. Mr. Miller's not there. I can. give the impending submitters some time to get here, but no. Mr. White should have been here 2 minutes ago. Did he? Or maybe he's assumed that he's spoken. So we'll just wait for Reece. If that's the case, we only have one to go, and that's Mr. Miller, and he's not due here for 10 minutes. But we'll just.
I'll second your motion.
What for? Is he? Kate's saying that Reece's submission is in committee, in confidential.
No, it's been redacted. The information that is private's been redacted. Yeah.
Right.
That's what I've been advised.
Only one more person can see it, otherwise it's best for it. Well, make my bag because I have to leave it. It'll be you if you leave. You can leave. Anybody else? Does anyone need to go when you leave?
Well, you have to consider what the lack of your contribution could mean to this council, councillor. We'll just take some time to get some direction from Sharon, because I'm not absolutely sure. I've had no indication that it'll be in committee. And
yep.
So welcome, Reece, and we'll just take a couple of minutes to work out what format we're going to use, whether we're in committee or not. So we'll just get some advice.
Did you have a PowerPoint? No.
In view of the circumstances that we move into committee, do I have a second to Councillor Benson Pope? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried.